Welcome, Lola. I'm really pleased that you're here to join us on the podcast. I understand that John Bond found you, and we're delighted to have you. So thank you.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to talk about aviation. I love doing podcasts.
Mm,
And yes, it was nice to be recruited by John. Sort of, it seemed to be out of the blue, but in fact, it was in conjunction with a big event,
yes.
Girls Take Flight at the Billy Bishop Toronto Island Airport in Ontario, Canada.
Yeah. He's.
And I met him that day too. He arrived with his granddaughters. That was great.
Yeah. Yeah. He was very excited. He said, "I've got this amazing guest." So that was you, by the way. Uh, so. Uh, so tell us. So the people listening, tell them, give us a sort of a history, bio, or whatever you want to
Yeah.
call it.
So
Mini.
I wasn't afraid of flying, but I appreciate people who are afraid of flying.
Mm,
I grew up in Belleville, Ontario. It's very close to Trenton Air Force Base, which is a major Canadian air base, and it is the air base when British royalty come from England to Canada. They
okay.
land at Trenton. But it's also the home in 1959, from 59 to 64, of the Canada's first aerobatic team and the Golden Hawks. And they would practice not literally over my house because that's verboten, but rather very near it. And of course, they'd be, doing flying. And it was so
Yeah.
exciting. It was basically having an air show in your backyard. And they would also perform annually at the Belleville Fair,
Mm,
which was pretty remarkable. But another thing that was very inspiring was when I was 7, my parents decided that rather than driving to the annual family reunion, we would fly. So today, maybe that doesn't sound so exciting, but I was 7 years old. So that's pretty exciting, being taken on an
yeah.
airplane
Yeah.
when you're 7. Not everybody who's 7 years old has been on an airplane. Many people haven't been on an airplane. So in
Mm,
1962, that was epic. And of course, I was all dressed up in a posh frock, and I was so excited. It was so much fun for me, but it was in a turboprop, and it was in August, so there was a lot of turbulence, a lot of thunderstorms, and my we and radar wasn't what it is today. And so whenever they visually saw the thundercloud, they deviated, but
mm,
sometimes they didn't. I thought this was like a ride at the fair. Also,
mm.
in 1962, there weren't the restrictions for little kids going on
Yes.
dangerous rides, basically, that you could fall out of, especially if you're, only what, I don't know, 3 foot 10 or something. Anyway, I thought it was wonderful. My mother was less than impressed, let me tell you. She did not want to get back on the airplane, but she did, to her credit. It was great. I just wanted to fly. I loved it. But not everybody does. And my husband only had one or two flights actually. I think one out west and then one to Mexico before we met. And so our very first flight, this is actually pretty amazing. It's hard to do it when it's just me, but he was hanging on my hand like this, right? We're sitting side by side, and he's hanging on my hand. But then he took his other hand and he just kind of held it like this. So, kind of nice. He's holding one hand and he's got the other one over. But what he was really doing was, as a physician, he was feeling my pulse. So here we are in takeoff, and we're going down the runway. We're passengers, right? But here we are, we're going down the runway, and he's just seeing if I, in fact, am scared. My pulse starts to race. Okay, he knows that there's something. He's a much more relaxed flyer now. I've taken him to
Ah,
that sounds patronizing. We have traveled to, and
yes.
I have
Yes.
encouraged him to fly to I don't know how many countries, but I've been to 65 and he's been to probably 70% of those with me. So I don't sure he really likes it anymore, but he's very
Mm,
comfortable. He knows that I won't pick an airline that doesn't have the best safety records. And that's an important tip, right?
yeah.
Don't get on, oh no, a disreputable airline. And there are
Yeah.
some, right, that just don't have the same standards. That's really important.
Mm. So you would say that you from the moment of being 7, you were like had a sort of a passion for aviation and
Yeah, I
yeah.
thought it was great. But I kind of got discouraged. In fact, I even got discouraged on one of those flights. I said
Mm,
to my dad, something like to my parents, something like, oh, when I grow up, I want to be a pilot. And he very dismissively and very negatively said, don't be silly. Girls don't fly airplanes. So my dad and I didn't have the best of relationships.
Mm,
Many reasons. I'm not sure which is the biggest one, but one of them was they didn't want children. In 1955, you didn't have a lot of choice about that one, really. And the second one was he wanted to be a pilot in World War II, and he joined the military wanting to be a pilot, probably like every other man that
yeah.
joined the
Yeah.
military anywhere in the world. But he had a hearing issue
Mm,
from too many childhood illnesses, and he had a great job. They trained him as an aircraft engineer. I thought that was a pretty cool job, actually. But he was very bitter and very jealous. So that runs through the current of my book a little
mm,
bit, and then we move forward until I do get a commercial license. But I remember being excited and wanting to take him flying, and he did come, but he sort of sat there the whole time, Mr. Grumpy Pants.
yeah.
And I actually didn't realize what was wrong until the next day, and I'm talking to an aunt. But my mom didn't go flying with me either, but she was super proud, so that was great. My sister went flying and she with me, and she loved it. So, and I didn't really expect my mom to go flying. I mean, if she thought a Victor's Viscount and a Vanguard were small, a two-seater Cessna is
Mm,
really tiny.
yes,
So I
yeah,
didn't
it's
really
tiny. Yeah.
expect her to do that. But I did eventually. I grew up. I kind of got discouraged, not just from my dad, but society. Dad Dad was basically speaking the truth, even though he was negative. He was right in that there weren't a lot of female
No.
commercial pilots. There were and have been almost, well, the Wright brothers flew in 1903. The first licensed female in the world was 1910. So not that much later. And not many people were flying anyway. So it was pretty cool to have someone flying so early. But there really weren't many female commercial pilots, and that made a big difference. So
Mm,
I thought, I didn't really want a traditional life, but I fell in love, got married, had a child, and our marriage was crumbling. And I got encouragement from my husband, who his dad and his uncle both flew small planes. They had other jobs, but they flew small planes. And we started taking flying lessons, trying to help our marriage. It didn't work. I don't recommend that
I've
when you're
never
afraid,
heard
when
that
they're,
before.
well, thinking, it'd be something we could do together. And
Right. Yeah.
we'd go to the airport together. We didn't take lessons together, but he'd go flying and I'd watch our son. We'd play in the sandbox or read.
Yeah.
Rupert Bear actually was one of his favorites, and or vice versa, right? And then it would be my turn to go flying, and Paul, my ex-husband or my husband then, would watch our son. And it didn't work, of course, but it
Mm,
might have if there weren't other underlying
yeah.
problems.
I
So
mean, most people
yeah.
go for counselling rather than flying lessons, so let's be honest. That's the normal
Yeah.
route.
Well, yeah, I think he knew we were beyond that too. And I do talk about that in my book.
Yeah.
He had some demons, and he was a he was a wonderful man, very exciting, a great father, really interesting, but he could be very aggressive. And I just
Mm,
didn't I certainly didn't want to live that way, but I also didn't want our son to
yes.
internalize his aggression as normal, which is why when I tell people, oh, the book has done real quite well, really. It's been since February of this year, it's been on and off the top
Mm,
100 in aviation and nautical biographies as an ebook and as a paperback.
yeah.
But it's also been in the top 100 for dysfunctional families. People said, "What? What are they thinking of?" I said, "Well, I came from one and I made one." So it has that human
Yeah.
interest too. It's not
Yeah.
just about Lola learns to fly an airplane and so what?
Mm. So perhaps you could tell us a little bit about your flying, from the beginning, first time you took
Yeah,
a flight, and then how you got hooked on and did the commercial
yeah.
flying and all the rest of it.
Right. Well, the first flight I took as a student, um, liked it. I certainly wasn't scared. That wasn't an issue for me, but I can appreciate
Mm.
how people feel that way. But what I didn't do that is I found much different than any student I ever had when, my instructor took off and we were maybe in the air 10 minutes, I'm not sure, maybe 12 minutes. And he, as almost as soon as he took off, he started talking about, you know, I'm a
Oh, losing you a bit.
right attitude, to a right turn, that kind of stuff. And then he said, and I was really comfortable, and he had a nice, smooth patter, but a nice, smooth voice, a nice, smooth flow. Then he said, would you like to take control? And I said, no, I do not want to take control.
I've no idea what happened there.
Okay, no problem.
It just cut off. Because
Yeah, it totally, yeah,
I got as far as um,
yeah.
you said I just took off, and then after that you froze, and it's doing it again. Let me try a different Wi-Fi.
Again,
How are we doing?
yes, you're talking now, moving now.
What's going on? I'm so sorry. I don't normally have this problem. I don't know what's going on.
Well, we've have terrible weather here. Um, I did once, we had to reschedule. It was a caller, not a caller, but the podcaster was in Australia and Melbourne, I think. And we had a
Mm,
terrible thunderstorm. But right now we're getting the effects of the hurricane, I guess Melissa.
yes.
It's just rainy here. But
Yeah.
that might be affecting the connection. It shouldn't. You know what? In this day and age, it shouldn't, but
No.
it does.
So let's see how we get on. So it's you.
Okay. Yeah,
I
yeah,
got as
good.
far as uh, I took off,
Okay. And that
and
was
that
it?
was
Okay.
yeah. Didn't hear
Okay.
anything after that.
Okay. So on my first lesson, it really wasn't a lesson. It's called an introductory flight, and it's only 20 minutes long. I hadn't read anything about aviation. I didn't have any training whatsoever, but the instructor was good. We got airborne, and as soon as we're airborne, really, he started talking about climbs, descents, turns, using all the correct words, gentle back pressure on the control column, turning right or rolling into a right banked attitude. But after about 10 minutes, he said, do you want to take control? And I said, no, not a chance. I said, no, no. So he sort of, he kind of sort of went, yeah, sure, I figured. And I said, but I will take control after I've had a lesson that lasts more than 10 minutes and I've read a little bit about
Mm,
the theory of flight. I mean, really a little bit, because really, my husband came home on a Thursday night and said, hey, let's go flying. It was like, okay, that sounds great. But we were in southwestern Ontario. I said, where are we going to learn? Like London?
yeah.
Oh, no. He said, there's this small airport nearby. Well, I didn't have any books to read and I had to work the next day. So, less than 48 hours later, I was in an airplane and it was pretty exciting. But I did learn that when I became an instructor and talking to other instructors, my reaction to him, do you want to take control? And my reaction was very different. Most people, in fact, everyone I ever taught said, sure, why not? But no, I wasn't interested. But, but
Mm,
after, and I then anyway, so we started taking lessons and I kind of procrastinated a little bit. I was, well, if you're going to take flight training, you need to do some very minor aerobatic maneuvers. And a couple of them had me kind of nervous, but
Yes.
I was I was persistent, and they wanted to send me solo because I'd done all the lessons, and I said, "No, I'm not ready. Yes, technically I'm ready. Technically I have the skills, but I don't yet have the confidence
Yes.
because I want to be able to do full spins." And they said, "Oh, you don't need to do that. That's not required." I went, "No, not on the flight test and not to fly an airplane, but
Yeah.
for me, it
Yeah.
is." So the instructor said, I happened to pick the right instructor for this. I had three instructors. He said, "Oh, right, I love spins," which was the right answer, right? Okay. And I was
I
pretty
have to say that
nervous.
sounds terrifying, you know.
Well, the first time, and I talk a little bit about it in my book, it was. And part of the reason it was terrifying is because the instructor who showed me the first spin, it was just a little one. Um, he himself was didn't like them.
Mm,
And that kind of, he
yeah.
never said, "Oh, I hate these things. They scare me. I really don't like this lesson, but we have to do it." And he was a very laid back guy. He looked like Lindbergh, which was probably, reassuring, but he didn't like spins. But that day, that I said, "No, I'm not going solo until I get a full hour lesson of spins," that guy was like, "Yeah, let's go do it." So that helped, to say the least. And yeah, so there's a little story about that in the book too. But it was very empowering
Yes. Yes.
uh, to 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 conquer your fear. And I think that really kind of ties in with your
Mm,
listeners, or our listeners, in that you may not want to take flying lessons, um, but it is a good way to conquer your fears. But whatever your fears are, just kind of address them. And I mentioned that in the book too. Yes, I was, afraid, and I had reason to be afraid. I mean, you are there, it's just like driving a car. There is the possibility of having an accident, obviously,
yes.
or
Yes.
riding on a streetcar. Frida
Mm,
Kahlo, one of the famous female Mexican artists, her life changed when she was in a streetcar accident. So there's a lots of things that are frightening, but probably somebody on your presentation podcast show has mentioned that you're in more danger of having a car accident on the
yes.
way to the airport than you
Yes.
are in the airplane itself. And that is
Right.
statistically.
Mm,
I did a couple lectures on that a few years ago, primarily to business groups who did a lot of traveling. And, there were these lots of major aircraft accidents. So I got all these statistics, and it was pretty interesting. The Autobahn had them beat, all told. All
really?
those aircraft accidents, the Autobahn was like 10 times more
Yeah. Yeah.
per year. So anyway, I faced my fears fearfully. That's how I described it.
Mm,
Yeah, it was but if you've got a reason to be afraid,
mm,
there's if you're not afraid, and you should be, you're probably a psychopath.
yeah.
So, right? So you should be afraid. You should be concerned. You should pick the right airline. You should, not fly into mountainous regions, perhaps at night, into Nepal, for example. Not a good plan. Right? I have flown into Nepal as a passenger, not at night. And again,
Yes.
you pick the right airline for sure, right?
Mm.
Yeah, it makes a very big difference.
I like the fact that also, as you're talking about, so I get a sense of you now when you're talking about taking your lessons, and you're not going to be forced to do it. So they
Right.
said to you, take the wheel, take the wheel,
Yeah, the wheel,
take
yeah, the
control,
stick, the wheel, whatever.
yeah. And then you've said, right, we want you to go solo. Said, no, not until I've done this. And so
Yeah.
you're going at your pace.
Yeah, it makes a big difference. It really
Mm,
does. And then we did procrastinate about my first solo, even after that, because we would then went on holidays. And to get to our family cottage, or to my husband's family cottage, we had to drive past a major World War II airport that was now a big training facility. And we had promised ourselves, no, we're not gonna go here. We're just gonna go straight to the cottage. Anyway, of course we didn't.
yeah.
Oh, let's just take a quick look. Anyway, I wound up finishing my flight training in a different airport, and then ultimately getting licensed at a third airport just because that's where the or
Mm,
the flight training inspector was.
yes.
So it was pretty exciting. And so I had lots of diverse experience, two different schools, four different instructors, two different aircraft, a Cessna 152, which is like this. This is a 172, but a high wing aircraft, and then
Yeah.
the low wing Piper aircraft. So I had lots of experience, lots of diverse experience, which I think served me in good stead in the long run. And when
So
I went solo, it was amazing.
so yeah, sorry, I cut across you then. So
Oh,
what kept you going towards it?
I don't know. I just loved it. I think I asked myself that too, but I think after I went solo, um, I I made a lot of decisions. This actually might be a time to read that short bit
Yeah, yeah, do
from
it.
my book,
Yeah.
if that
Okay.
works,
Yeah,
because I made
please
a
do.
lot of decisions right after that, and then I can talk about that. So I've just taken off. It's my first solo. I'm at the Muskoka Airport. Memories of childhood flood my conscience. I feel as exhilarated as 4-year-old me zooming down the hillside. Sidewalk on my tricycle, a sparkling blue three-wheeled miracle. Tinsel strips stream from my handle grips, flash in the sunlight, and create an illusion of great speed. Unshackled from fettered footfall, nothing had electrified me more than gliding downhill, feet off the pedals, legs outstretched, in control. That is, until now, until flying in control of an aircraft.
Yeah.
The wind is calm. I don't need to worry about wind gusts as I approach for landing on my first solo touchdown. And I don't need to worry about winds blowing at an angle to the runway. The plane descends on course. When the two main wheels chirp hello to the tarmac, I start to breathe, knowing all my worry and procrastination about my first solo has been a waste of time. Seconds later, the nose wheel touches down, and instead of coming to a full stop, I accelerate, sprint down the runway, and fly toward the open territory of the practice area. My heart thrums in harmony with the purring engine as I climb to 4,000 feet, then enjoy the lakes and rivers below me. After 5 minutes, I review turns, stalls, power to idle spins, unable to believe I'm alone in my own aircraft, unescorted, unassisted, unmanned. My shoulders tingle with joy. Today's accomplishment is a landmark in my life, a sea change to define me and mold my idea of me and what I can achieve when I find the courage to believe in me. And I think it was just so
Wow.
empowering. I mean,
Yeah.
driving a car, many of us know how to drive a car, and we learn it at 16 in Canada. Um, and that was pretty empowering for sure. But this was just amazing. It was like, you know what? This is what I want to do. I
Yeah.
think just it was the most exciting thing. And I made my decision then um, to do something that I had been wanting to do for a year, which is leave my husband. And I didn't do it right away, but it took 2 weeks, so pretty much right away. And I decided that I think then that I was just going to continue taking flight lessons um, and get a commercial license, get my instructor rating, get a float rating,
Wow.
and at some point become a commercial pilot. And what was interesting, and I also wonder about this too, even though I I was the only female, so the very first flight lesson we took at the airport, everyone was male, the instructors, everyone, the ramp boys, they were boys, were men, were male. My husband was male, our child was male, and
Yeah.
all along I was the only female, and I didn't really feel any resentment or even feel unusual until I actually started flying commercially. And at that point, I did get some resistance, actually from
Mm,
my father, my mother, my grandfather, who
so,
were, in part terrified, but also my
mm,
grandfather said, And he apologized right away. But he said, "You'll be taking jobs from men." So if my family wasn't so happy about me quitting a perfectly good job in the bank, and going to fly and take jobs for men, y- I it wasn't that unreasonable that I would get some
Yeah.
negative, some pushback from people who didn't even know me. I mean,
Mm,
I was the first female pilot they'd seen. Right? I was the first female pilot they'd seen. So, and that I'd seen, and certainly they were. So there were some issues there for sure, but I loved it. I just thought, this is what I want to do, and
yeah, yeah.
I had a great time.
So so that sounds amazing. I mean, it's still a low percentage, isn't it, across the world of
It's
female pilots, about
incredible.
5% or something, isn't it? But
Yeah, it's incredible. There are a couple exceptions. One of them is here in Canada at the Billy Bishop Toronto Island Airport, Porter Airlines, and they have 12% female
yeah,
pilots, including I think chief female, the third chief pilot. No, I'm not saying that right. For the third time in a row, the chief pilot is female,
yeah,
and all along for the past 10 years, the one of the two assistant pilots is female as well. And there's one other country in the world that has about the same number, 12 to 13%. Any guesses?
India.
Nobody. Yes, yes. Good for you. Yeah, absolutely. Because of course they've got that. They support their kids and they say,
Yeah,
and it may not be for everybody, but if I was your mom, I'd say, Paul, you're going to be a pilot, and your sister Susan, she's going to be a lawyer, and Bill's going to be a
yeah.
doctor, and they pay for the education, they support their children. And the interesting thing is, they don't have to actually follow that profession. And there may be some room for deviation. And,
Mm,
I really hate studying to be a doctor. Maybe I could do nuclear medicine or,
yeah.
become a physicist or something. But again, they're geared toward a professional career
Mm,
with a lot of support. Um, yeah. So I mean, I did have some support that way. My parents were keen
yeah,
and my grandparents were keen to have me go to uni, so that was good.
yeah. So when are we talking that you entered, so from the time of like that first solo flight in that Cessna or whatever Piper or
Hmm.
whatever it was,
Yes,
um,
well, that's the first one.
yeah, through till starting in a commercial flying role, how long was that? And when was it?
Um, yeah. So March 17th, 1979 was my first flight, and I got my first job as an instructor June 1st, 1980. So
Was
15 months.
wow, you moved,
Yeah,
you
I,
shifted.
I really, yeah. Well, once I believed in myself, you know, I'm going
Yeah,
for it. Yeah, and I
yeah,
just did. So yeah, I did. I got the private license, and then I just started training. Well, my night endorsement, and then my commercial license, and then my instructor rating, and then a bit later a float endorsement. So yeah, it just seemed to flow very organically. A multi-engine IFR. I did that. Um, I did get a government grant for that, which was super helpful
mm,
while I was working as an instructor. So that was great.
yeah. And so what period? So when you went the commercial route, when was that first, and
In
who
the
began?
80s. Yeah, so I flew for the Ontario government. I
Yeah,
flew out west for a small charter company um, in the British Columbia, so our western province, and I flew in the interior. And that was great experience too,
yeah,
because of the Rocky Mountains and the Coast Mountains. And now you can actually get a special mountain endorsement because of the mountain wave phenomena. And of course, not only are there mountains, they're close to the ocean. So I don't need to lecture you about, the fog rolling in on, onto the coastline and into the mountains. But then it was like, okay, here's the airplane. Yeah, great, you're hired.
yeah,
There's the airplane. Go
yeah,
fly. And it was exciting to say the least, I have got myself into a box canyon, which means, you have to figure out how to do a 180 and get out of there. And, flying VFR, the weather's supposed to be VFR all the way. And that's better if you're going to sort of be anywhere near the mountains or landing at various spots
mm,
throughout the mountainous area. and then having to stop and get a clearance, an IFR clearance, because the weather was just so bad. But it was a great experience.
Yeah, sounds great, stroke scary. I guess that's all part of the training, isn't it? You know.
It is, right? You have to believe in yourself. And I think that's really important. Now, I also understand that maybe that's not so hard, not so easy if you're in control. It might be sort of like person who's driving the car. Um, you're not driving the car, but the other person is, and maybe you're not feeling quite so comfortable with the person who is driving the car, and maybe you should be feeling a little bit afraid. And that's why I highly recommend, doing your research and don't get on that flight if you have any doubts. Don't buy a flight on that particular airline. And you can find out which airlines are good. Offhand, I don't know the site, but you just Google it, what airlines have good ratings. And also, if they're part of, well, we have Star Alliance and other,
Yeah.
if they're linked together, KLM, Air
Mm.
France, Air Canada,
Yeah.
they're kind of linked together. And that's really important too, because there really are some dodgy airlines. You don't want to be on them.
Yeah.
I don't want to be on them.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, that's good. That will probably trigger a few people now. So we might need to clarify what that means.
Uh, in terms of, well, there's some very highly reputable airlines,
Mm.
but in maybe smaller, less developed countries,
Yeah.
third world countries,
Yeah.
that you may not be flying to anyhow. But that's particularly important to be concerned. And I mean, I'm certainly not going to name any airlines or any countries, but a less developed country with minimal infrastructure
Yeah.
might be better to take the bus.
Yeah. We say that too. Yeah. We say, like Western world developed,
Right, right.
commercial
You're
aviation.
good to go. You're
Yeah.
good to
Exactly.
go.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
I
So
can't think
thank you
of
for
any
clarifying
British
that.
carrier. Yeah, I can't think of any British carrier or Canadian or American carrier that I wouldn't hop on.
No.
Or
No.
Mexican carrier. Yeah. And in fact, when I said earlier that my husband had some concerns, last year we flew to Turkey on Turkish Air. It was fabulous. I've
Mm.
flown Royal Air Morocco. Fabulous, absolutely
Yeah.
fabulous. Kenya Airways, fabulous. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, and sometimes we have it in our mind that it may not be so good, and really they're fabulous.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess it's like a natural human thing. I always think, if you're going to go somewhere and you think I might not understand what they say to me, it's set out different, things
Yes.
happen differently. I think it's natural for humans to kind of be a little bit on edge. So I think
It
that's
is. It's
normal.
absolutely on edge. As
Mm.
actually my husband likes to say, it's really we're hardwired for that, right? Back to our
Yeah,
cave dwelling days where you you didn't stop to wait until they got closer. You were immediately on if a stranger got closer, you were immediately on the defensive
yeah,
or a
mm,
strange animal. So that's why we have, the old brain with the amygdala that
mm,
it says fear, flight or fight, right? And,
yeah,
should I be afraid? No, I should. I'm
yeah,
good. I'm good. And we do have that.
mm,
But do your research, learn to fly. Oh, I mentioned earlier, I guess before we were recording, when I was uh, first flying, one of the students, not my students, but he was a student of our chief flying instructor, he learned to fly because he was terrified of flying. So
yeah,
his goal was to take the bull by the horns and conquer
yeah,
this beast. And he was motivated because he was actually the professor at my university. He was one of my own professors in psychology, but he was married to a Japanese woman. So every summer they had the
mm,
whole summer off, right? So she would fly to Japan with their child at that time, and he took the boat. So after 2 years of that, he said, "This is ridiculous.
yes,
I've got to get over this fear." And he was a wonderful pilot. I did ultimately fly with him on several occasions, but I
yeah,
didn't do his initial training. And so then it was much easier, right? He could spend the whole summer in Japan with
yeah,
his wife and children instead of being on the boat. So everybody does it for different reasons. Um,
mm.
flying, I guess, in England it's very expensive in Canada, but I guess it's very expensive in
Yes, I
England.
think a
But
lot of people go to Australia or the US to train because
yeah,
it's
yeah.
cheaper.
Yeah,
Yeah.
when I was at Waterloo, we actually had a wing that had sort of dormitory style rooms with common kitchens, and we had people from the UK come over to fly
Mm, mm,
because I had no idea. This was in the late 70s, early 80s. I had no idea, but one guy said it was cheaper for him to stay for a month in Canada, airfare return,
yeah,
and all his meals, and learn to fly
yeah.
than it was in England.
Crazy,
I
isn't it?
was aghast. Yeah,
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 crazy.
amazing. Yeah. And I guess I'm a little surprised at that because you'd think supply and demand, there'd be a lot of people wanting to learn to fly. You've got a lot, you probably have as many airports as we do.
Yeah, I
Really. I
think
mean, I haven't done a study on that, but
mm,
you have a lot of airports.
we do. I think the challenge for us is fuel cost
Ah,
uh,
yes.
and the weather. Weather's not
Mm,
predictable, so people tend to put those two things together. You're going to get like more consistent weather in other countries than you'll get
well,
in the
that's a good
UK.
point.
Four
Yeah, that's
seasons
a
in
good
one
point.
day.
A couple of years ago, we had some really bad weather. And at that time, sort of after that stretch, and then
Mm,
COVID, and then a couple of years of bad weather, I know a couple pilots who, and to me, this is astonishing, have 200 hours and they have yet to go solo, which is astonishing because when I started working as an instructor, I had mm, 280 hours total. So I had done my private, my commercial, and my instructor in 280 hours. But that's another thing. Even though it's weather, but it's also concentrated, right? You want to just
mm,
the more you can fly, you know. And even if you only get to the solo stage, it's amazing. It's just so empowering. I can't believe it. It was sort of like, okay, if I can do this
yeah.
with limitations, I can do anything. And in my case, my limitation was this.
Mm,
So now with laser surgery, um, and the fact that now most training is done on a simulator, and you do your line check on the real
yeah.
aircraft, but
Yeah.
that combined effort meant that I would not be flying for a major air carrier. So I loved what I was doing. I love flying Twin Otters and Dash 8s. I worked for the Ontario Government. I worked for DeHavilland Flight Safety in Toronto,
Hmm.
at Downsview Airport, and I loved it. But I thought, and I could have done something else, maybe gone back to float flying, done something like that. But I just kind of did a career change, and I rather circuitously, but I wound up in Mexico as a scuba dive master. And I lived in Mexico for 3 years. That's actually the topic of my next book is working as a scuba dive master in Cozumel, which is fantastic if you
Yeah.
ever get a chance to go. It's beautiful. And if you don't scuba dive, there's lots of snorkeling and the weather's 80 degrees. So what, 20, 27, 28 degrees centigrade. It's fabulous. And then I wound up living in the homes of several different Maya families in Central America and Mexico. So that was really
I,
eye-opening as
I
well.
didn't I didn't see that coming. So
Yeah.
where have you
So
been
how
flying
does
now
that
then?
link?
Are you still
Pardon?
flying now? Do you still
Not
fly?
really. No, I have a license. Um, as I said, there aren't that many
Mm,
airports in Canada. So there isn't one. Well, there's the Trenton Air Force Base, but you really just don't do fun flying out of an
yes.
air base.
Yeah.
And we had an airport to the south, a World War II airport, one of the
Mm,
triangular British Commonwealth Air Training Program airports. And then it got closed last year, which was really unfortunate. But I did go flying twice last year. I went both out of Oshawa, which is near Toronto, and I flew with CBC. So CBC, so the Canadian Broadcasting Company,
right.
wanted to interview me, which was very cool. And they said, "Do you want to go? Can we go flying? Can you take us flying?" It's like, sure, why not? That'd be fun. And then a bit later on, so it was June of last year, and then September
Mm,
or early October, maybe last year, I say it was approached by TVO, which is TV Ontario, and they basically said the same thing, which was really very cool. And with we went back to the Oshawa airport, or I went back to the Oshawa airport, and it was it, we couldn't have asked for better days. I mean, we've got all
Yeah.
these people who are coordinating. I had to get the Oshawa people to rearrange their schedule so I could get an airplane on a certain day to get, the
Mm.
broadcasting people come. And so they had to get out of Toronto and I had to get to Oshawa. And then we had to pray for good weather, right? It was perfect. It couldn't have been better on both days. And by perfect, I mean great for
Yeah.
videographers. We had
Mm.
GoPros up here, video camera in the back. The weather, the wind was calm, and the viz was excellent. And I don't need calm weather to fly, but it's really important if you're sitting in the back seat and you're trying to be a videographer and look out the
Mm.
window and enjoy the flight.
Yeah.
I wanted
Yeah.
to make sure they enjoyed the flight, and didn't think I was some kind of lunatic pilot. I'm
So you
not.
didn't mind them sort of, so you're going about your job because like I don't know if this happens to you, but if I'm typing and someone leans over my shoulder, I make mistakes. And so you've got like GoPros and film crew, and that doesn't put you off.
Yeah. Um, no, it didn't. I was very relaxed. I
Mm.
find it a little tense when the person who's watching me is a civil aviation inspector and
Yes.
they're doing a flight test. Um, but that depends also on the on the inspector as well. It just depends.
Mm.
But yeah, I am the same way with a computer. And it stems from in grade 9 typing, which
Mm.
I was positively abysmal at.
Yeah.
I got 39%. Anyway, we had this teacher, Magdalena Muehlhart, who was from Argentina, and she would walk around the class and oh gosh, what's his name? George Carlin. Do you remember George Carlin? Class, class. So she'd walk around the class and sneak up behind you with one of those long wooden pointers. She wouldn't
Yeah.
hit you. I mean, she was not a cruel woman.
Yeah.
She was probably lovely. And her husband certainly was lovely. He was our photography teacher. She'd whap your desk and go, class, class, sit up. It's like,
Yeah. No wonder that you give you a heart attack. Bloody hell. Crikey.
anyway, as I say, she was probably
Yeah.
really very lovely, but she scared the crap right out of most
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
me
I bet.
anyway. Yeah. Yeah, and then of course, my mother was a legal secretary, so she was very discouraged that her daughter couldn't type you
Yes.
know, and I talked about that in the book too. It's like, Mom, you know what? No offense, but I don't want to be a legal secretary or any kind of secretary or a nurse or a doctor or a teacher. I just, I was kind of at loose ends, which maybe also I got married because I just didn't want to be any of those careers.
Mm.
Um, so it's funny how when I did start flying, I was 24, which is the same age as Amelia Earhart when she started flying. So I thought, well, that was pretty cool. Yeah, maybe it was
Yeah.
meant to be. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. So tell me about the what made you write the book.
Oh, well, it was a Facebook posting. So
Mm.
when I got out of flying, right, I'm in Mexico and I come back to go to school and I meet my husband, my person who's now my husband. And so but I continued going back to Mexico, Belize, and Guatemala. So I could fly nonstop from Toronto to Cancun and then take a bus to some of the more remote areas. But to get to Guatemala or Belize, at that time, there were no nonstop direct flights. So I would have to do the American hub system, which is fine. I would go from Toronto to Atlanta and then say Guatemala City or Houston or Miami. And every time, so this is I'll say from 98 to 2014, I I would see female first officers. And I thought, wow, this is great. I don't think I ever saw a captain, but that made sense because, women were really just getting into major air carriers. So it'd be normal that they were first officers. So that was really great. So then in 2014, there was this Facebook posting that my husband drew to my attention. And it was written on, one of the little nappies, the little serviettes that the
Mm.
airlines have for your snacks. And it was written to a female captain of WestJet, which is one of our big carriers
Yeah.
mostly in the West. And it was Dear Captain, the cockpit of an airliner is no place for a woman. We are short mothers and wives. The next time WestJet has a fair lady at the helm, please advise me so I can take another flight. And I went, what? What? What is going on? I thought that crap was
Yeah.
gone.
Yeah.
I thought,
Yeah.
the crap that I put up with, where's the pilot? Aren't you just saving the seat? Did you just borrow that jacket? All those questions. Surely you're not the pilot, that kind of stuff. I thought we were done with that. So I started investigating, and I made contacts with the 99's International Organization of Women Pilots, with Women in Aviation International, with Canadian Women in Aviation
Mm.
International, which is separate but kind of an offshoot. And I learned that there are invitation only Facebook groups, which I now belong to, for female pilots, either at the flight training stage, at the licensed stage, at the professionally licensed stage. And you can belong to any of them if you're in training or a licensed pilot and female. And while this stuff is still going on. So I thought, wow, I'm
Yeah.
going to tell my story because it also filled a void. There were lot there weren't too many, but there are now lots of stories, and they're wonderful about the WASPs, the American WASPs in
Mm.
World War II, and the British Canadian ATA, Air Transport Auxiliary, female pilots.
Yeah.
Fabulous stories, fabulous movies, a lot of historical fiction, and a lot of
Yeah.
actual history. But there weren't many about my era during the time. And the reason is, if you're flying commercially, and you need the job, as in money is helpful, you're not really going to start writing a book that says, this is the way my employer treated me. And this is the way the guys I worked with treated me,
Yeah.
because you're going to get fired, probably. I mean, you
Yes.
may have a long-term lawsuit. And even if you flew that, so now those women going forward, some of them are retired, but my, believe it or not, a lot of the people in my book are dead for one reason or the other. And it has nothing to do with airlines, by the way. They've just, my mom died, my dad died, my sister's still alive, my grandparents have passed. A lot of the guys I flew with, nobody had an aircraft accident, but they're dead, right? They, for
Mm.
whatever reason.
Yeah.
So I thought, I'm going to step on a couple people's toes, and I was kind of more concerned with their wives, the reaction of their wives, because I am talking about sexual harassment.
Yeah.
So I changed the names, except for the principal characters, my husband, my son, and some of the good guys. Those are the real names, but no surnames, because
Yeah.
it's not that kind of a book. It's
Yeah.
just a book
Yeah.
about, this is what happened, this is what I learned. So it's,
Mm.
even though it's a memoir, and I wrote about my experience, it's about what I learned and how you can benefit, how the reader can benefit, or the listener.
Yeah.
My audiobook's going to come out next week. I'm so excited. How the listener can, interpret those, and what to do. And I've had so many people say it's empowering, it's an easy read. Some parts aren't as easy to read, but it's written in an easy to read style.
Yes.
And yes, there are some tense parts, but it's empowering and uplifting. And some people said also that it was what's the word? Oh, that that they could identify with it, and they thought,
Yeah.
oh, it's not just me.
Yeah.
Validating. It was validating, because I thought, oh, wow,
Mm.
maybe I did something to make that person not trust me or not think I was capable. And no, that's not it. The
Mm.
basic premise really there is, once we're no longer called female pilots, we'll know that people aren't looking at us first as female and
Yes.
secondly as pilots. And that's a big thing. We
Mm.
do still have male nurses, at least in Canada, which is the same thing, only from the male perspective, right?
Yeah.
They're nurses, just like the female nurses. So that's a big step. We need to start thinking about who is really qualified. And I do see a lot of changes.
Mm,
You scroll through Instagram or Facebook, videos. There's a lot of really empowering stuff. Famous female in history. And I do write for other publications. So we have COPA, which is Canadian Owners and Pilots Association. So I do write for them, and I also write for it's a regional Ontario magazine that has nothing to do with aviation, but I've written a few stories for them or and excerpts from my book, but I
yeah.
also do travel writing for them. But my recent gig with them is famous females. So the first woman licensed, the first female doctor in
Mm,
modern history, which, by the
yes.
way, was an American but trained in England. So that's pretty cool. And then came back to America, to New York. And then I'm going to write. What did I just write about? Martha Gellhorn, very famous World War II war correspondent and Vietnam correspondent. So famous women in history.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited about that. She, by the way, have you heard of Martha Gellhorn?
I'm not sure I
No.
have.
Yeah, no. And that's one reason we need to hear more about famous
Mm,
women. So Martha Gellhorn is in journalistic school or areas, people will know who she is. But
yeah.
in non-journalistic, she's probably best known as Hemingway's third wife. But in 60 years, she covered all kinds of conflicts, Vietnam, the Arab-Israeli War, and she was actually the only female war correspondent at Omaha Beach. She snuck on board a medical ship and then snuck on board a um, a landing craft repurposed as an ambulance.
Wow.
Yeah,
You're
pretty
writing about
exciting.
this. So this is the
Yeah,
next one, is it? Oh, amazing.
yeah, yeah. So that kind of stuff is really important. So
Yeah,
I,
yeah.
because and my editor for this magazine, which is called Grapevine, as they said, has nothing to do with aviation. But he said, I mean, I know, Lola, that your big thrust is aviation. No kidding. And I'm keen to support that. But, what about other
Yeah.
famous women who are maybe recognized, who are recognized in history, but we may not have heard of them for whatever reason.
Mm,
So it's sort of a herstory as opposed to
yeah.
history, a herstory feature, 600 words or less. It's fun. The
Yeah.
interesting thing was that the stumbling block was getting copyright. And I said, well, how about I do a sketch? Nobody can, I've got a picture of Martha Gellhorn to be like, here I am, and I draw a picture of myself. I've got a picture of Martha Gellhorn. So for the first one, which was Elizabeth Blackwell, the physician, the pictures from 1870 we could use them, no problem.
Mm,
But Martha Gellhorn only died, I believe, in 1998. So her pictures or pictures of her are copyright. In many cases, the copyright permission is given
mm.
without fee, but it's still getting it, right? It's like,
Yeah,
I'm going
yeah,
to draw a picture.
yeah.
So, which
That's
looked
smart.
pretty good.
Smart move. So,
Yeah.
give a little plug for the book then. Where
Oh,
you can get it.
well, I would be thrilled. You can get it on Amazon. And I mentioned earlier, I think, about it's been, so you can order it on Amazon. And for the past, maybe since February, it's been on and off the top 100 in the bestsellers,
Nice.
in aviation and nautical biographies, in print and in ebook. So you
Yeah,
can get it at Amazon.com or Amazon.co.uk.
yeah,
And it's also been in the top 100 on dysfunctional families because my parents had a dysfunctional family. Thanks to me, they didn't want kids, but here I came along, and then my sister, and then I created my own little dysfunctional family. So it's a bunch of,
yeah.
family life and dysfunctional family. And by the way, I've been happily married for 28 years to a great guy now.
Yeah.
And my audiobook is coming out next week.
And
And
why did you
we
call
have
it Highway to the Sky?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Highway to the Sky, an aviator's journey. Oh, this is a real photo. This part of it is.
Mm,
This is touched up with AI, I guess. It's kind of cool. The original photo was taken in Whitehorse in the Yukon in one of our northern sort of territories, just east of Alaska and adjacent to Alaska and north of BC. And I mean, I liked the photo. I thought it was great. Two funny things. The one of the employees at this school, which is called Alcan Air, he took the photo, and I guess being kind of vain, I looked at my picture, at my face, and I said, I look okay. But I didn't notice until I sent the picture to my editor, and my feet were cut off. So the sky is AI generated, which is funny because it was done in San Diego, so Southern California. And I mean, it is a winter scene, but I know that's what they think of Canada, right? Right? It's,
Yeah, of course.
land of ice and snow and northern lights, and that's very, very cool. I mean, I'm wearing a faux fur coat. It's all good. Other cool thing is a year or two after the fact, I learned that Alcan Air, the name is still on. I got permission for that. Alcan Air is owned and operated by a woman, which I thought was really cool. And I
Mm,
was in Whitehorse doing a 5-day dog mushing course. So I got my dog mushing certificate, which was so much fun. And I had a couple days left over. And for one day, I did kind of the touristy thing.
yeah.
And then I thought, I want to go flying. So I just rang them up and they had an opening. And I had a check pilot with me, obviously, because
Mm,
even though you have a license, they just don't give you an airplane.
no.
Uh, it's you need to get checked out. And I said, fine, I just want to fly around and have some fun anyway. So
Yeah.
it was great. So yeah, I'd be thrilled. You can get it anywhere. It's also available almost from any Amazon because I know I early on I had an email from a reader in Finland. I thought, wow, that's very cool. And
Yeah.
he was inspired because he has two daughters, and he thought, this will be
Yeah.
just, so great for them to read. So I think we need more stories. Um,
Mm,
Not just about, dangers. There's one in America by Tammy Jo Schultz called Nerves of Steel, and how she did save the lives of her crew and the passengers in an American air carrier. But we need stuff just about sort of the day-to-day life of what it's like, and
mm,
looking after childcare as a single mom. So it does hit a lot of
yeah. Yeah.
categories of what it was. And then the dating scene. Oh boy, that was fun.
So don't give any more away. But anyway, this sounds great. So people have a look. Highway to the Sky. Love that. Nice.
Thank you.
This is from Lola Reid Allin. Did you say Allin?
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
it.
Yep.
I thought I'd have a go at it, see if I get it right. Um, and it's on Amazon, so check it out. And
Yeah.
also, if you do happen to download it, buy it, or whatever, and you do have any comments, please pass them on, obviously, back to Lola. And if you want to do that, you can do that through us as well. We'll make sure that Lola gets them. But I really wish you every success with it. Sounds like
Well, thank you
you've
so
got so
much.
much stuff in it, not just
Yeah,
aviation.
yeah, not no, it's not just aviation. It's
Mm,
really the story about wanting something slightly different, or just wanting a career and believing in yourself. And it didn't happen overnight. I mean, yes, my success was quick because I just, I quit my job and that's what I did. I went flying, period. That's what I did. I studied, I flew, I studied, I flew,
yeah,
and looked after our son. But I had joint custody, by the way, which was super nice. But really, I just went for it, and believing in yourself and realizing that fear is normal is super empowering.
that's like
And
your
I
mind.
have a website. Yeah, I also have a website. People can,
Oh, tell us what it
reach me
is. Yeah,
directly.
please do.
It's just lolareidallin.com.
Okay,
So I can send all that information to
that'd be
you.
great. Thank you.
Yeah, I can Google me and I'm sure a bunch of hits will come up. So yeah, thank you
Amazing.
so much.
Thank
Pleasure.
you. Lovely to
Oh,
meet
it's my
you. Thank you.
pleasure. Yeah,
Thank you
yeah, it's
so
been
much
great.
for your time.
Oh, thank you so much. I had a great time.